just acknowledge the Gadigal people of this land on which we celebrate Winda Film Festival. It's an absolute pleasure to have these two amazing producers next to us. I was saying to both Kerry and Kiel, I think I always see one and not the other, and to have both, because they're always so busy, that one's either back in New Zealand working on something in post-production or in pre, and the other one is running around doing all the publicity on the next film. So it's so lovely to have both of you in the same space, and especially to be here by tomorrow for our closing ceremony. And we're hoping the rain's going to go away today so that we can have it outside. So I just maybe get you both to introduce yourselves, because you've got so much in the backstory.
Okay, bueno malana, name blomi Kerry Warkia, place blomi Raloana Rabao, or Papua New Guinea, and I'm also from Patterson clan on my mother's side, and on my father's side I'm from Raloana in Papua New Guinea, and I grew up there and then went to New Zealand for drama school, and that's where I met Kiel, and we got married and had 3 children. And just started, I guess, using our children to tell stories, and then and then it kind of became a bit more legitimate that we started to get into the industry and do a better job of telling stories, and I guess empowering other people to tell their stories is kind of where my passion lies and sits at the moment. That's where I'm happy to exist and be. So yeah, that's me.
Kia ora koutou. Ko Taupiri te Maunga. My mountain is Taupiri. Ko Waikato te Awa. My river is Waikato. Ko Waikato Tainui is my tribe, my iwi. Ko Kiel McNaughton toku ingoa. My surname McNaughton comes from the McNaughton clan in Scotland. I have a castle in Scotland. It's not mine, but I belong to the McNaughton Dundarav Castle, which is on the shore of Loch Fyne. And I also my grandfather is from a village in China, in Guangzhou, called Nam Chern. So our children are Maori, Chinese, Scottish, and Papua New Guinean. They're a real fruit salad.
They're just mostly confused, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's me. Kerry, can I introduce us?
Kiel also went to drama school.
Yes, I also went to drama school, and that's where we met here. So that's me. Sorry, I've just got to say that I've got a little bit of a man flu that Pauline just dubbed a man flu. I feel as though it's been a bit of a sickness, and so I'm a little bit dopey. I'm just putting that on the table.
I mean, Applegrant Productions has done some really different innovations. You've worked across the industry. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey as a production to get to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So when we started out, Brown Sugar Apple Grant Productions is the name of the production company, and it's a dessert that we really like to eat. And then we probably eat too much of it, to be honest. But then we started making, we started using it to make short films in the 48-hour film competition, which runs in New Zealand, and then we moved into pitching for to be able to make sort of web series. And we made one of the first web series in New Zealand, and we made it week to week, so we would shoot on a Friday and a Saturday, edit on a Monday, the network would view it on the Tuesday, and we were doing pickups we needed to do on that Tuesday afternoon. They would view it in the morning, and then on Wednesday we would go into sound and grade, and on Thursday it would go live. we kind of repeated that for 6 weeks and sort of nearly died, and our children had a big coup and they were unhappy with life and us. And so they ended up just living with us at the studio the whole time. But that was our first kind of project, and then that got picked up for television, and then we made the television version of that, and then we kind of got into making web series and TV content. And from that, we really wanted to make this project, particularly vignettes in one shot, and we started writing that project, I guess. But when we thought about putting it in for funding, and we kind of were going for innovative funding because we knew that we would never get the money to make this project from, the big pots of drama money. And so we looked to innovation at Te Māngai Pāho, which is the Māori sort of funding body, and New Zealand On Air. And then we realised that we actually needed to put that project in the hands of Māori women, and that we needed to step back, because originally Kiel was going to direct Waru. But as we started to write it, we started to realise that he wasn't the right person to be telling that story. And so we built that in. Literally the night before we were delivering it, we decided that we needed to have Māori women front and centre telling that story, acting in it, writing it, directing it. And so that was the kind of the genesis of Waru. And we put that in, and the funders said yes, they would fund it, and then we did the call out to look for Māori women. And one of the feedback that came from the funders was that you're not going to get 8 female Māori directors because they don't exist. And that was an incredibly frustrating moment, one of those moments where you go choose your battles. Instead of speaking to that, we'll just prove that wrong. But it was incredibly frustrating to hear that from, your funders of the nation. Like, we were like, whoa, that's an incredibly narrow view. So we put what we call an expression of interest out. So we put that out, and we had 49 Māori female directors apply that we interviewed. And they're all of them could have done the job. Yeah. But that's kind of this starting point of our company, and then we went from that to the next film and the next one, and just more development and more making film. But it started off with a dessert.
I mean, that's one thing that's really amazing about, I suppose, the journey, because we forget that Vi is a part of a bigger story that both of you have created for yourselves, that this is a trilogy, and this is the second in the installment. But there's a very unique way that you guys go about the process of doing these films. They're produced, like from script to screen airing, it's like 6 months. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process first, about the script, the six-day workshop, I suppose? Maybe?
Yeah, there's a sense of urgency that I think we that's inherent in a lot of our work, actually, but in the creation of this and the framework that we hang the films on. So when we talk about the trilogy of films, there's Waru, which is the first one, which was made with Māori female writer-directors, Vi, which was made with Pacifica female writer-directors, and Kainga is our third one that we're in the process of getting funded, which is Pan-Asian women from New Zealand, Pan-Asian Kiwi women. And so the sense of urgency that we have is part of it's potentially built on this idea of getting stuck in development hell, where we believe you can sometimes overdevelop something or sit on something for so long that it in a way becomes irrelevant. So the way that we start off is with a 5-day writers retreat. We have already set the restrictions. We call them creative restrictions. There's about, between 5 and 8 of them. and the writer-directors, they come to this retreat, and we set the deadline of, at the end of the 5 days, we will have a first draft of the whole film. And that can be a little bit daunting, it usually is, and there's a little bit of trying to get out of it on the first day. But ultimately, it's working instinctively, it's working collaboratively. There's a security within the group, which I think allows people to be courageous, because you're not necessarily given the opportunity to second and third guess your own creative choices. So the writers' retreat, we go away and we provide all of the food and the drinks and everything for the writers, and we have an outline for the 5 days where it's, I can't actually remember. Do you remember?
So basically we everyone arrives like on a Sunday, and then we're there Monday to Friday, and then we all leave on Saturday. And usually that first night, so we actually, so it is quite, we take, it's manaakitanga, like you take care of people. And so we make sure that there's a chef that does all of the cooking. None of the women are cooking and doing dishes and crap like that. They're there to work and be creative and focus in on the work. And so we make sure that we want to really take care of them while they're there. And also it's work that I think is very personal. What we've found with lots of writers, because authenticity is another big thing that's important to us, and I guess something that we always want to strive for. And what we've found with some writers that we've worked with is that you might have a really authentic voice, but translating that voice into an authentic story can be quite a difficult, it's a difficult leap. And so we want to be able to create an environment where that can happen. And when that starts to happen, it's quite contagious. And so if other people are picking up on that when they're sharing and speaking to that, then there are others in the room that can take that and apply it to their own thinking and their own work. And so there's a real think tank going on amongst the Ropu, the group that we've brought together. And I also just want to say, with the non-negotiables, like the creative kind of restrictions that we have, everyone is very aware of them well before they're signing on to the project. It's not like we just throw it at them when they arrive. They all know this, they've signed and agreed to be, to buy into that and be part of that when they come. And even when they do come, they still try and change it sometimes. And we just have those, we just have to go, remember, we're not changing that, it's a non-negotiable. So we have to work inside the framework. So, there's a little bit of that. But really on day one, it is about exploring themes and talking. I mean, there's a lot of crying, so there's tissues everywhere. It's we're talking about identity, we're talking about family, we're talking about very personal stories. And we're encouraging those personal stories because that can connect to the voice that you have that is authentic. And so that's what usually happens. And we kind of write and share bits and pieces and write dialogue, and we kind of get them to, we set deadlines and we set tasks. And on Wednesday, we've already told everyone that we've booked actors. Actors are coming on the Wednesday. So on the Monday and Tuesday, we're doing a lot of work and writing. On Wednesday, we're going to be moving the pieces. We're going to hear dialogue. We're going to talk through with actors. They're going to offer their opinions and their understanding of what's happening. And the actors are fabulous. They're just such a wonderful beast, actors, and such a great resource. I mean, in the whole industry, people are the resource. People are the people that that make everything happen. And so the actors come and the writer directors work with them and then take gold from that and put that back into their scripts. And so usually by the Friday or Saturday morning, as it happened on scripts were delivered to us, are sent to us. And everyone's always reading and sharing each other's work. And that's really important.
Yeah. So with just to clarify on those scripts, each of the writers will be writing a 10-minute long scene. Ultimately, it's a 10-minute long, continuous, real-time, one-take scene, which is one of the reasons why we get the actors to come in, because not a lot of writer directors have have made a single 10-minute shot before. And so it's important to be able to feel how long that is and what, you know, the kind of character work that you have to do with that, just how long you might be sitting watching a character for. So yeah.
And also how the actor is so important to the journey of that script and of that story, because essentially once you go to shoot, you're handing it to them. All you can do is look at, there's no, let's cut, let's stop, and when you go into this, I'd like, you know, there is none of that. It's a continuous one take, and you have to go the whole take until you stop, and then you can talk to the actor about what it is that's missing, or, you know, and then you're viewing the work back, and you're, you know, it's a real choreography, it's a dance.
That's
that
what I was about
everyone
to say.
is involved in.
It very much looks like a choreography at times, in especially, you know, Vi, you see some real beautiful moments of movement. So when you see the film, you'll notice that all of the 10-minute segments are just one shot. But also your shoot is intense. Like you're talking about a script being developed within 6 days for a feature film, but each set, each island only gets 2 days, with 1 day of rehearsal and 1 day of shoot.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through that crazy idea?
Yeah. Again, there's this sense of urgency. It's part of it is about budget. With Wadu, with our first one, we only had $400,000 for the production budget, and so we had to come up with a way to shoot quickly. But what we found is that, again, if you don't get the opportunity to second guess yourself too much, but you're surrounded by an experienced team and a team that is really collaborative, you can make really good decisions quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, they do, so everyone gets 1 day to rehearse and then 1 day to shoot. And the rehearsal is a technical rehearsal, so it is, you are rehearsing with everyone and with your props, you're rehearsing.
Can I just say something on top of that? Before we come to shooting, there are, I think with all of the writer-directors, they get a couple of days to rehearse without cameras and all of that, so they get time with their actors, if their actors have been cast, before we get to the production period.
Yeah, and they do have workshops, so when we leave the writer's retreat, we organise workshops, and those workshops are again with other actors. And that's also a nice way to test, for the directors to also test different actors out. Without, you know, and the actors get to be paid because sometimes you're calling actors in for audition after audition, you know, and that can get frustrating. And so within this, we've worked out a way that it benefits the actors as well as the writer directors, and we get them to come and they do these workshops. And sometimes it might be the actor that the director is thinking they're going to use at the time, but they just want to see if they have the right element. And so that's quite a good way, I think, like in terms of, again, just manaakitanga, like just taking care of the industry as a whole as much as we can, just in small ways. But so they have these workshops, and the workshops again add to their script. So then they're doing a second draft, and that gets sent to the entire group. And then a third draft gets sent to the entire group again. And so we're all feeding in. And most people are giving their feedback. If they have feedback on any particular script, usually they would send that through to us. And we would think about that and incorporate that in one set of notes that goes back, rather than 10 different people giving notes, you know. That can kind of get a little bit daunting, I think. So there is definitely like a understanding, I think, amongst the group about how we treat each other and how we respect one another within the work.
So for Waru, which was a lot cheaper than Vi, a lot more underfunded than Vi, I should say, it was essentially an 8-day shoot, for a feature film. Where they had their rehearsal day, camera rehearsal day with the DOP and some of the other crew, not a full crew, and then
their actors,
and then the actual schedule was 4 days of shooting. We have 3 days off, and then another 4 days of shooting, and that was the feature done. and essentially it was done because there's not a lot of editing to do when you're dealing with one shots. So
Yes, you don't have a massive post-production
No, you don't.
kind of tail. You're choosing your take.
Yeah. To be fair, there are no cuts in some of the films, in some of the shorts, and then with Vi, there are some visible cuts, which we had to make, and we had to give leniency to, because we were only going to be on the island for a certain amount of time, and we didn't want to leave not being 100% certain we had the film. So with Vi, it was still an 8-day shoot, but it was over the course of about 6 weeks, because of all of the travel, and it was a much better budget, and we were island hopping. We had a team that we had 2 teams. How do I explain
Yeah,
that?
so it took us a long time to figure out the scheduling, but we got there in the end. But we decided what we needed to do was have a because we filmed in 8 different islands, right, including the North Island and South Island of New Zealand. And so we had Team Hibiscus and Team Frangipani, so we had 2 teams. They had a coordinator, an art director in each of those teams, and those 2 people would travel with the director. So when we went to, and they would prep ahead. So when we went to, the first place we shot was with Media George. She's the writer-director of our Kukiairani film in Vi, and we shot that in Rarotonga. So we were all there in Rarotonga except for the Frangipani team, which was our coordinator, one coordinator and one art director, who travelled with Beck Sarahanga to Motueka with her cast and crew and worked with her there, and a locations person. So while we were all shooting in Rarotonga, they were setting up in Motueka so that our entire crew would then fly to Motueka and shoot there. Then the art director and the coordinator from Rarotonga, they went with Matasila Freshwater to Solomon Islands, and they set up there. So we were kind of leapfrogging like that, with a crew of 17 of our team all moving together, and then a crew that was going ahead, which was pretty much just 3 people and the director, and
they also had local crew,
and we had local crew on the ground everywhere. So everywhere we kind of connected with local crew, and so that's that's essentially how we shot that one. And we only had really small areas where we could have any kind of leeway, and I think in Rarotonga it bucketed down, like it poured down. We were so lucky because we had built in an extra couple of days of fat there purely because of the flights. And so we were so lucky, and then the sun shone the next day, and we were like, right, this is the day we're going to shoot it. So we made a weather call, we had a day off, and then we shot the next day, and it was perfect. And then we went to Motueka. It was threatening to rain and flood. It didn't. It absolutely held out. The sun came out at the perfect time, because it's also in bush and it was freezing because the islands were hot but New Zealand was cold. And then we left and the floods came. And then we went to Solomon Islands, and again we were really lucky there. We had a very rough sea day, and the actress was terrified. And so that was really difficult, but then again we built in a little bit of fat purely because we couldn't get a flight out on the day that we wanted to leave, and so we were just like, I mean, I feel like all of our ancestors were like, we got you here, you know, like it was pretty scary at some points. In fact, we went and shot the Solomon Islands we got up at 4 a.m. and went and shot before we all had to rush back to the hotel, pack all our stuff and go and catch the flight to Fiji. And of course everyone was burnt to pieces in Solomon's in a couple of days when we showed up in Fiji, and all of the crew know when you show up for the next director, you have got to be on form. Everything else that happens somewhere else goes out the window. You are fresh and clean and ready for this one. And Sharon Whippy is sitting over here, and her and Nicole showed up for our for our first hui with the director when we all arrived, and we were like, "Hi, Nicole! but we were burnt to pieces. And like, just had to be on form for the next director, you know, it was like, and give them 110%.
Sorry about the phone.
Yeah.
Bex and that have just arrived.
Oh, yay, perfect.
Some of our directors from Vi got diverted last night with the electric storm to Brisbane, so they're now in Sydney, thank God. I think one of the things that's also really amazing is that the way that you inspire, you know, the directors and the community to sort of, because a lot of these communities, especially in the Pacific, don't have infrastructure to be able to afford to, and the fact that the community themselves sort of come behind these directors to help tell the story is an amazing thing.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I definitely think that a lot of credit goes towards the writer-directors and their own personal connections, Indigenous connections to those islands and to their whānau there, and because it was pretty much all of their family and friends and villagers who came out, you know, who came out to support it. And I think that just can't be underestimated. You know, if you're gonna go somewhere, go into somewhere, let all of those local people guide you and take you on a journey. You know, and that really happened, and we were so blessed that they all wanted to come and support their women. You know, it was pretty beautiful. And we just needed to make sure that we were being as respectful as we could be, that if we were upskilling any crew that were there, if they needed to know things. I know for the Solomons, it was pretty hilarious. We had to build a rig out in the ocean, and the grip needed some weights, and he and the village said to him, "Oh yeah, we've got weights," and he was like, "Okay, perfect." You know, because we're still operating kind of on a budget. And for some reason his box didn't arrive, one of his boxes didn't arrive, and so he needed these weights, and they all showed up with these different car parts, and he was like, okay, yeah, gonna make this work, and then just had to weight the camera with the different car parts. And then at the end of the day, they all took them back again and had to reuse them. So the next day, he needed to find new car parts from other members of the village were like, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll go and sort it out for you. And they would come back with, I mean, it was fantastic. It was really great. It was, you know, they were anything that they could do to help, and they were very number 8 wire. You know, they were just using what was around, and what's brilliant about that is that they can see that you can just use what's around sometimes. Yeah. You know, like, it's learning for both sides.
And that's the amazing thing, is that we know that you know, our people are innovative, right, to get things done. Yeah. And so, you know, that lesson about innovation in film and being a part of communal sort of kind of is such a Indigenous way of doing things, is being communal, and so film fits for a lot of us in terms of that world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think so. I think that film inherently is a collaboration. You can't do it without other people. You know, you can't shoot it without actors. You can't. Everybody's got a role to play, and I think that that's also just a very it's a very Indigenous way of working as well. Everyone's working for the greater good of something. Everyone's doing their part. It's also, you know, a village mentality, and I think that's what you want to build when you're collaborating with this many writer-directors, is that within that everyone has individual merit, but there is a collective merit that we're all striving for, and that our piece needs to add to that. You know, we're all still, that's still our obligation. And within that you have all of these beautiful different ideas and personalities and viewpoints coming through, and that actually makes it better.
And I think it's also something that the rest of the industry strives to talk about, innovation and inclusion, and yet in the Indigenous spectrum it's something that, I mean, I remember there was one time someone was explaining because I was like, what's an impact producer? This is a couple of years ago. And they were explaining what that was. And I was like, yeah, but that's what we do as Indigenous producers on all of our stuff, right? So it's that thing of, just because it hasn't been done in mainstream doesn't mean it can't be done in the way in which you are telling these stories. But also, now that you're developing 8 directors at the one time, that could also be an issue in terms of how to get them to the feature by themselves as well. And is that a part of a dialogue and a conversation that you guys have been having?
Yeah, it is. It's I think it's in an annoying way. It's the part where it kind of slows down a little bit, because we then get because we try to develop these innovative and more indigenous ways of working, but then to move forward, it still has to fit within this idea of traditional kind of filmmaking, or traditional Western kind of filmmaking, which you get into this thing of having to develop something the correct way, the way that the funders understand. We've even run into some issues with trying to get our third film in the trilogy funded, because they weren't quite, even though they came and they took a step forward with Vi, there were things that didn't work for them. I'm talking about the funders. That didn't 100% work the way that they had hoped that they would work, and so I think what has to happen is potentially a little bit more time will need to be spent with us. I guess what's the word? What's the word?
Like,
Begins
like
with a C.
compromising?
Compromising. Yeah. Sorry, this is my illness. It's my illness. It's compromising with what we're trying to achieve, and with what the funding body needs to achieve as well. And so, yeah, I think in order to make those next steps, because we have, hopefully we've developed how many? 18 women, to be able to go on to that next step. And I mean, they should be falling over themselves to try and fund these people, because they're all talented and can go to the next step. But yeah, there are these hurdles to jump over.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that I'm hearing anyway from the funders is scripts, right? Is like feature scripts, and the type of feature scripts, and whether feature scripts are ready, and are they market ready, and who is going to, and part of me is frustrated by that, because I think, again, it's kind of barrier after barrier after barrier, rather than just saying, have you got a story that you want to tell? What are the beats of all of those stories? You could break it down in the exact same way, 10 minutes, you can have your 8-act structure, have 10 minutes for each of those. Like, I think that there's ways that they can actually engage with particularly the writer-directors that have written on Wara and Vi, because of the way that that's been done. And like you say, they should be falling over themselves trying to fund them. I mean, if you want to raise the female population of writer-directors and women of colour, it's easy. They're there. Like, this is not
You
a
just
difficult.
do it.
You just do it. Like, you don't keep putting up barriers. You find ways to actually help, and because that is also your job, right? Like, you get paid every week to figure out how to help different people make films. Like, this doesn't seem so difficult to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also the reality is that they expect, I suppose, because of the success of Waru and Vi, they expect everything to be at a standard that is not a flop.
Yeah, and I have an issue with their definition of standards of excellence, and what is an excellent film, and what is it, and aiming for this and that and the other thing. And it's like, okay, but surely we can also have the opportunity to experiment, to try, to have our first time without all of the pressure that you put on. It's easy to give between 1.5 and 2 million to a female director for her first feature film, and just let her work with really good producers on that and make the film that they're going to make, not make a film that is your standard of excellence, whatever that may be. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I just have an issue with their ideas of that, or just, I guess, like we were talking about before, they work within a structure and a system that exists, and even though they may be really awesome individual humans and people, they're still feeding a structure that exists in a system that exists that isn't necessarily the right way to go about making things, particularly if you want to work with Indigenous people or women of color, or we kind of travel, like, talk over the same ground of all of these things. There's a whole heap of reasons why that you all thought in 2016 there would not be more than 8 Māori female directors, right? There's something there that's ingrained, that sits there, that still tells you now in 2019 that you can't find any women of color to make a feature film. Like, that is the thing that needs to be removed from the table, from the equation, from your brain, because they're there. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I might throw it out to the audience, because we could talk all day, really.
Yeah.
But also the other thing that I think is really beautiful, I don't know if this is an idea of yours, but Waru was about an event, I suppose, and had the 10 minutes within that event from different perspectives. So you sort of kind of felt like you knew who was doing what film, in a way, if you knew their shorts.
Right.
And I think with Vi, the thematic of the character being the bit that links it. Actually, even though it's a little bit different in the way that you've done it, has transformed the way you guys are doing these trilogies as well. Like, is the third one, I always wanted to ask you this, is the third one like a different link to the thematic sort of style as well, or you haven't got there yet?
No, yeah, the third one is different. Again, it's kind of playing with time. So kainga means home in Māori, and it is exploring and kind of dissecting the idea of home for Pan-Asian women, and their interaction with tangata whenua, and how sometimes home makes you, and sometimes you're unmade by home, or sometimes you can't make home, or all of these different intricacies that will come up, I'm sure, in the writers' retreat. But we are also playing with time, in terms of how long does it take you to make home. Because in New Zealand, there's also this perspective where if you are of Asian heritage, we were just talking about this the other day, there is the question of where are you from? And you might be 8th generation New Zealander with Chinese background, but and these questions constantly come from Pākehā. Well, where are you from? It's like, well, I'm a Kiwi. So it's kind of, we wanted to just put a voice to that and talk about that and look at that, and and there is throughout all of that the kind of the presence of tangata whenua and how you interact with that when you are making home. But also,
we'll also have our within our creative framework, the non-negotiables is that it's a 10-minute long single shot or continuous shot. It's in real time. It will be a lead female character of the underrepresented, I guess, voice in for kainga, for example. It's Pan-Asian women, so it'll be a lead character of the ethnicity of the writer-director, and you'll have one day to shoot. And then I think those are the 3 major ones that are consistent throughout all of the films.
We have in Vi we had water as a connecting image system, and in kainga we have a dwelling as a connective image system. So whatever that might be, how they interpret that.
And then there will be, so like with Waru, it was the same 10 minutes in time. So there will be a creative component that deals with time. In Vi, the time was that each of the vignettes were 8 to 12 years apart.
So Vi is growing through the film.
And then the connecting thing with Waru was that they were all connected to the death of a child. With Vi, it was the same character. It was that each of the lead characters had a shared history. and then I can't remember what it is.
Essentially the same woman.
Kanya?
The connecting.
I can't remember.
No, I think.
Oh no, it follows the journey of making a home. So so each of the characters will
in some way be making home, or home is making them, or So that's for the women to determine. But then we've set up the vignette. So each has a story moment that is about making home. And within that, we've set a timeline which isn't necessarily linear. Yeah, and so then how we solidify all of that happens in the writers' retreat with all of the writers. So there's a little bit of leeway. I mean, that stuff stays, but then how it's all put together is decided by the group.
Amazing. I might throw it out if anyone has any questions.
Hi. So in Moru, I'm curious about all those interconnectednesses between the different pieces. So that all happened within the 5 days?
Yeah.
Or was there anything that happened before? It was just all in the 5 days?
Yeah, so basically what we did was, we wrote the document when we went in for funding, and inside that document we had examples of stories and where connections could happen in stories. Because in 2009, we wrote a pilot called The Next 8 Minutes. And we shot that pilot, and it was 5 segments, all 8 minutes long, and all of those characters interconnected. And we actually shot it with the same crew that we then used 7 or 9 years later on Waru and on Vai, and that we've continued to work with. We sort of started with them and said, we've got this crazy idea, and they were the only ones who said, yeah, we'll help you. No one else did. So we shot that over sort of 3 weekends and put it together, and just sort of as a test of concept. And then when we brought it out again. So when we wrote, we kind of put in examples of how in the same 10 minutes in time you could connect these, and then when each of the when we got together in the writers' retreat, when they were writing, that's when they started organically finding moments where they could connect story. And then also I think there was some of it that happened then, and then in post it was like choosing the songs, and then because in some of them the songs are the same as well. You might hear it in one car and then the next vignette, and so we had to time that out. So there was a lot more precision in terms of timing out all of those connectedness moments, because every vignette was the same minutes in time. So we had to make sure that we were timing and everything was happening at the exact time it needed to happen for when it would happen in the other vignette.
What was quite interesting when we were doing the 5-day writers retreat with Waru, it was the first time that we were doing something like that kind of anyone had done this kind of thing. It was probably maybe about the 3rd day in when a couple of the writers started realizing that they wanted to use characters from someone else's vignette to appear in their vignette, and it just became a really interesting thing of how another writer-director might use a character that another
someone
writer
else has written and wrote
had created.
And so there was also, and rightly so, completely human, feelings of going, well, do I let my character go into another story? Like, how does that, you have ownership of people you've created. And so that was a really interesting, we were like, okay, let's watch this unfold and figure out where we need to smooth things out when they start getting a little bit anxious, But in the end, it was totally fine, and there was absolutely a generosity there. But it was very interesting at the start, when you come to the table and you're all together and one person says, I'm just wondering if she could enter mine. And you just see the clocks turning and the clogs kind of turning in other writer-directors' minds, kind of going, do I want her to leave my story? How is that gonna, which was both fascinating and beautiful, and we had a few giggles at night, kind of just lying there going, yes, we'll see tomorrow how she feels about that idea. But yeah, so that was quite beautiful. And there might have been a couple of things that happened in post when we all watched everything together, and then one person went, oh, I'm just going to change this song at the top to connect with this one. And so that was quite beautiful because we hadn't recorded the sound on that, or whatever it was. So lots of serendipitous moments where it was like, oh my God, thank God we didn't do the sound on that one, because we can actually change it, or we don't see her mouth moving there, or whatever it was.
You worked so beautifully. I loved all that. Both. I have another question, just in regards to here in Australia. There's the protocols document in Canada, which is recently launched, I think, too. So just would love to hear more, maybe with Vi as the reference point, about how you relied on the filmmakers themselves to really ensure that the protocols from their own island nations were really reflected and represented in the work that was created.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did have, each of the writer-directors were also really encouraged to reach out to elders in their community, or people that they felt would really give them that strength in the cultural decisions that they were making, particularly if they didn't feel super connected to their culture or didn't speak their language. And so everyone pretty much found lots of people, either within their family or their family asking other elders in the area. And so that was really great, because then they were able to read scripts or able to contribute in that way. And there was a budget set aside for all of, for each and every one of those roles. And just making sure also that when we got to the places that we were honouring that crew and letting them lead us sometimes. In Samoa, Marina McNaughton is here, and she directed our Samoan piece. And in Manono there was we had a Ava ceremony, and Marina's uncle came and spoke on behalf of us, and he's like a chief in his own right with all of his own titles. And when we went to Manono, they had all of the island and it was the most amazing ceremony, like to be there and experience that, and all of the cheekiness and the wonderfulness and the history. And we kind of tried to do that everywhere we went, so that all of the women felt really grounded and comfortable. And supported culturally, spiritually, and all of us. I mean, I was like, if I go somewhere and the spirits are angry, it's not going to be a good thing. We absolutely have to make right with the place.
Yeah, just on a producing level, I think it was important for us that the crew attend all of that. And
yes.
So we made sure that usually on a travel day, we would get there and then the meal would be part of that kind of travel day, but sometimes it would be the day after, and potentially a day off. And so if it fell on a day off, we decided to ensure that the crew were paid to come to these events, because it's important for everyone.
And I think it's just an acknowledging of both sides, like giving the fee, giving the payment, or the quota, is acknowledging that the crew have worked really, really hard. They've worked however many days, and they do need a day off, and that is a contractual obligation that we have. But also that the culture that we're walking into, we haven't been there, we haven't done anything with them, we haven't had, and so while we also want to honour them. And so it was just us kind of going how do we make room for everything and for everyone to feel good about everything that they're doing? And also, I think in Samoa, most people's families came. So they came for a holiday because that was halfway through, and they came to the Ava ceremony, and it was a beautiful cultural moment for everyone. And we have our crew were kind of, I think most of our HODs, I think we had a good split between women and men, and most of them were either Maori or Pacific. And then we had other crew members who had never been to some of these places before, never experienced, and so many of them had huge spiritual moments, or breakdowns or connectedness, and really changed them, and they were very vocal about it, and some bawled their eyes out, and it was really wonderful for everyone. It was such a privilege to be able to do that, and yeah.
But it's also that thing of working together as a whole collective of Indigenous people. There's often not a lot of explaining that has to be done. That must be really refreshing in some way for you guys, that's obviously why you work together as well, because there's, half of that work's doesn't have to be done.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, like Mata has often said, there's a shorthand. You don't have to explain. If you're writing into a script something spiritual, you don't necessarily have to explain the significance of that. We get it. You know, like we're there, we get it. And in hers, in some people's, there's movement, you know, in the films. And in hers, it's just two women each in a canoe. And that's it. That's the entire 10-minute piece, you know, and it's about spirituality. And that's okay. Like, that's perfect. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you find sometimes there might be creatives with really strong voices, but then there can be difficulty translating that strong voice in a script, creating that story. What have you learned or discovered that you would say helps to nurture that translation in someone that might be finding it difficult to find their voice in whether it's screenwriting or directing in that translation?
I mean, I think with both Water and Vai, I think that all of those women were in a space that was safe and encouraging for them to access stories that previously they may have felt is something that should be shameful. And they were able to sort of access that story and make it theirs, make it relevant, make it heard. And I think that really helps to kind of bridge the idea of this sort of authentic voice and then authentic storytelling, and being able to pull those two things together. It doesn't have, sometimes those subjects that you've felt like, I can't talk about that because that might make my mother look bad, or that might, you know, hurt. Whereas actually you're telling something that's beautiful and human, and that we're all going to connect to because we have all either witnessed or know that story somehow, somewhere. And I think with every single character in both of those films, there is something so human about it that you can connect to it and go, oh my God, yes. And you may not have literally been there, but you understand what it, you know, where that character is, and I think so. I think it's kind of more about the truth of something, like being able to access. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's something about the way, like a one shot as well, that can force you into being honest with a character, because there's no escape. You can't rely on any trickery to, you know, what we usually do in film, which is, you know, shot, reverse shot, and, you know, you can iron things out in post-production and whatnot. Yeah, you kind of, when you've written your character's journey over 10 minutes in time, you get to, I think you can pinpoint where things aren't being honest or authentic, potentially a lot easier than in a more traditional screenplay.
Or also, I think, kind of purpose and, you know, I mean, I do think that narrative storytelling and the beats and points that you need to have in narrative storytelling still exist in kind of those 10 minutes. But I think that it's, yeah, because you're with that character the whole time, there is no breathing room, like you're right there. And so all of those beats and moments, you're just much more aware of. They have to happen, and the actor has to be able to find them too. And so they're also contributing to that conversation about, yes, but how am I feeling right here? Like, this seems like a gap to me, or why is she making this choice? Or so you're held accountable for every minute that story is unraveling, because we're not going anywhere else. We're staying right here with her all the way through. So I do think that the 10-minute one-shot forces them into honesty and authenticity, and kind of holding themselves accountable to what they're putting on the screen. One of the reasons that we also did that was so that no one could change it at the other end. And that is true of kind of funders or networks. We didn't want them to change the story that all of the women had come up with and decided upon in the writers' retreat. And then, you know, in traditional television, it goes to 9 other people, and they look through it, and they all give their feedback, and everyone's got a different idea, and nobody was there right at the beginning when you're doing it all, but now they want to change everything over here. And I think there are a lot of directors that were burned by that, and we wanted to make sure that nothing could be changed. And so you got one day, you got one 10-minute take, you choose your take, and that's it. That's us. Now we're just in post-production, and nobody can change it.
How did you manage all the
legal? Yeah, that took a long time. There was definitely long conversations about that.
What are you cooking up next?
Oh. Yeah, okay. Well, Jodie is sitting over here in the back there. We just had a meeting with Jodie and Taryn from Western Australia, and we're making a film with them with Aboriginal female writer-directors in the same vein. So Screen West has committed to funding that, and so we're really excited about that. Yeah. And also Kiel has a feature film called The Legend of Baron Thor, which is it's a superhero Pacific action film, which is an action comedy, which we're just in final stages of post-production, and that comes out next year in New Zealand and Australia.
It's not really superhero. But it's a fight film.
It's an action comedy fight film.
It's all set in a cul-de-sac. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
He doesn't have superpowers, but he's pretty super.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasise the significance of what Kerry and Carl have done within the New Zealand film industry, because before Waru, there were only 2 feature films directed by female Māori filmmakers. The first was a husband and wife team, Warkia husband, Māori wife, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name. And then the second was Merata Mita, who, and there's an amazing documentary made by his son going around, currently screening. And with Vi, before Vi, in the history of New Zealand cinema, there were only 2 films made, directed by females of Pacific descent. One was by Simayu Raleigh, and another one co-directed with Madeline Sami and Jackie Van Beek of Pākehā Women. So what they did was they changed the landscape of cinema overnight with these 2 films. So thank you for doing what you did and for giving us an opportunity.
Thank you, Marina.
Yeah, I think ultimately for us and for the to be able to make more of these films. So with the one that so Screen West came to us to talk about how we might be able to work with them. And essentially what we're doing is licensing the creative framework. So we don't have, we're not going to have ownership of the film that's created as a result. We're executive producers, and the producers who come on will be able to, will have ownership of the film ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. It's important for the two female Aboriginal producers to have ownership, and to be able, and for the writer-directors to also have ownership of that kaupapa, rather than us, so, yeah, I mean, I'm so stoked about that.
It's great, because we tried to do it after Barbara, we tried to sort of talk about trying to get it done over this side. And there's just not the backing of the money at this point. So it was like, but glad that it's getting done.
It's getting done.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you both for being, at the forefront and being innovative and being who you are, with joy and with a lot of compassion. To take on that many directors at the one time, to massage all of that, and as well your family life and putting your kids through all of that, and it definitely in these films is you know, it takes a village to make these films, and you do it with such class and such beauty that it's so lovely, and we're so privileged to have shown both Waru at Winda and
Oh my
Vibe.
gosh, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we look forward to, you know, we're so glad that it got sold out, and we're hoping that, you know, the rain doesn't keep people away.
Yeah.
But you know, we do have a winter cover. We're like you, we think outside the square and make sure there's a wet weather cover. But yeah, thank you so much for both being in the same space at the same time. I know it's often a really hard thing unless you're in production. And everyone, just thank Kerry and Carl.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.